In the warm, shallow seas of the Miocene, a shadow twice the length of a school bus rises beneath a whale calf separated from its pod, closes the last few meters in a single powerful surge, and ends the hunt with one bite from jaws lined with serrated teeth longer than a human hand. For more than a century, this is the animal every book, documentary, and blockbuster film has shown you. A monstrous, oversized great white shark, thick through the body and built like a torpedo. That image is wrong, and the fossil that finally proved it had been sitting inside a Belgian museum since the 1860s. Start with the name because it matters. When naturalist Louis Agassiz formally described this shark in 1843, he placed it in the genus Carcharodon, the same genus that contains the modern great white shark, and for more than a century afterward, that classification stuck. Scientists, artists, and filmmakers all built their picture of this extinct giant around its living genus mate. It made intuitive sense. The teeth of both animals are large, triangular, and serrated, and teeth are almost the entire fossil record this shark left behind, since a shark's skeleton is made of cartilage, not bone, and cartilage rarely survives long enough to fossilize. The first real crack in that assumption came in 1960, when a researcher named Cassier argued the shark was only a distant cousin of the great white, not a close relative at all, and proposed pulling it into its own genus. That argument set off decades of taxonomic back and forth, with researchers shuffling the animal between several different genus names before the evidence finally settled. Detailed analysis of tooth structure and enamel microstructure eventually confirmed Cassier's instinct. This shark was reclassified out of Carcharodon entirely, moved into an extinct family called Otodontidae, a lineage traceable back through earlier giant sharks like Otodus obliquus, which was already a distinct separate genus tens of millions of years before Megalodon itself ever appeared. The animal's true name became Otodus megalodon. Modern great white sharks turned out to be more closely related to mako sharks than to Megalodon. The resemblance between their teeth was not inherited from a shared ancestor. It was convergent evolution. Two unrelated lineages independently arriving at the same solution for slicing through flesh. The same reason dolphins and sharks both ended up with a similar streamlined body shape despite one being a mammal and the other a fish separated by hundreds of millions of years. Looking alike in nature is not the same thing as being related. If you're finding this interesting, be sure to subscribe. Getting the name right didn't settle what Megalodon actually looked like, and for that answer, everything came back to a single fossil. In the 1860s, workers digging through Miocene-age sand deposits near Antwerp, Belgium, uncovered something almost nothing preserves: an associated vertebral column from a single megalodon, 141 separate vertebrae, still recognizable as belonging to one individual animal. Shark skeletons almost never survive intact, since cartilage breaks down long before it can fossilize, which makes this specimen catalogued as IRSNB P9893, and now housed at the Royal Belgian Institute of Natural Sciences in Brussels, the most complete megalodon vertebral column ever discovered anywhere on Earth. Even so, complete is relative. Museum records show several vertebrae carry duplicated position labels, and more than a dozen numbered positions in the original sequence are missing entirely. Gaps that every later researcher has had to account for when trying to reconstruct the living animal from this one specimen. For well over a century, it sat as a curiosity. Then, in 1996, researchers used it for the first serious attempt at reconstructing Megalodon's actual size. The method relied on a simple relationship seen in living sharks. The wider a vertebra, the longer the animal it came from tends to be. Applying that ratio to the widest vertebrae in the Belgian column produced an estimated body length of roughly 9.2 meters, including a head and tail that the fossil itself did not actually contain. That comparison came with an unavoidable assumption already built in. The great white shark, still classified at the time as Megalodon's closest living relative, became the default model for what the rest of the body should look like. big, thick-bodied, built like a torpedo with muscle to spare. In 2022, a research team published a study titled "The Extinct Shark Otodus Megalodon was a transoceanic superpredator," taking that same Belgian specimen and building the most detailed three-dimensional reconstruction of Megalodon ever attempted. They digitally scanned all 141 vertebrae, then attached that column to a scan of the skull, jaw, and complete body of a modern great white shark, using the living animal as a physical template to fill in everything the fossil itself was missing. Their model came out stocky and powerful. A shark built like a torpedo with a triangular head and heavy midsection, estimated at around 16 meters long and roughly 48,000 kilograms, capable of crossing entire ocean basins in search of prey. The same study used that stocky body to model the animal's swimming performance and daily food requirements, concluding that a shark built this way could have hunted other large predators, not just whales, and that its presence alone could have reshaped entire marine ecosystems wherever it patrolled. It became the reconstruction used across museum displays, documentaries, and news coverage almost overnight, treated as the most scientifically rigorous megalodon model anyone had produced. It was wrong, and the error was hiding in the same fossil the reconstruction depended on. In 2024, a team of 26 shark researchers went back to the same Belgian vertebral column and found something that did not add up. One of the study's lead authors had been troubled for years by a simple mismatch. Published reconstructions kept giving Megalodon a stocky, heavily muscled build, yet the largest individual vertebrae in the Belgian column were surprisingly small in diameter for an animal supposedly built that way. A separate growth band analysis of 3 of those same vertebrae, similar to counting tree rings, had already estimated this particular shark was around 46 years old when it died, evidence that the specimen was a mature, fully grown adult rather than a juvenile whose proportions might still change. That ruled out age as an explanation for the mismatch. The 2022 reconstruction had calculated the vertebral column's own length at 11.1 meters. But an earlier separate calculation, based on that same fossil, had put the shark's total body length, including head and tail, at only 9.2 meters. That's the equivalent of measuring someone's leg bone and getting a result longer than their claimed full height. The spine alone was supposedly longer than the entire animal it belonged to, a straightforward impossibility. Something about the assumptions built into the original body model had to be wrong. The team went further, measuring body proportions across 145 living shark species and 20 extinct ones, then testing which body shape actually fit the physical dimensions of the Belgian vertebrae. Their conclusion? The great white shark was the wrong animal to model Megalodon after entirely. This shark's vertebral column was too narrow and too lightly built to have supported a stocky, thick-bodied frame that size. A body that heavy, wrapped around a spine that thin, would not have functioned, the same way a bus frame welded onto a bicycle's axles would buckle under its own weight. Using the comparative data, the team calculated that Megalodon's head likely made up only about 16.6% of its total body length, and its tail roughly 32.6%, proportions that point toward a longer, leaner animal rather than a bulky one. Instead of a great white, the proportions matched a longer, more streamlined body plan, closer to a modern lemon shark, an animal built for efficient, sustained cruising over long distances rather than the great white's shorter, more explosive bursts of speed. Subscribe to not miss the next one. The correction didn't stop at body shape. A separate set of roughly 20 associated vertebrae collected from the Gram Formation in Denmark in the early 1980s and analyzed by a different researcher working independently of the Belgian specimen included individual centra up to 23 centimeters across, considerably larger than any single vertebra in the Belgian specimen. Because the Danish vertebrae were never found together with any teeth, researchers can say with total certainty which species they belong to, though their size and structure are consistent with Megalodon and no other known shark from the same time period. Applying the same slender body proportions to this larger Danish individual suggested that some megalodons may have grown even bigger than the Belgian shark, potentially reaching 24.3 meters, close to 80 feet, and roughly 94 tons. The picture that emerged was not a smaller, more modestly sized megalodon. It was a shark that could be even bigger than earlier estimates suggested, just built completely differently than anyone had modeled, with a longer, more efficient frame suited to patrolling open ocean rather than relying on short bursts of raw power the way a great white does. What makes this correction land so hard is that it wasn't based on a new fossil discovery erasing an old one. It was the exact same Belgian spine, sitting in the exact same museum collection since the 1860s, re-examined with a level of scrutiny nobody had applied to it before. The assumption that broke first wasn't about the fossil itself. It was the decision, built in from the moment Agassiz gave this shark its first name, to measure an extinct giant against a living relative that later turned out not to be a relative at all. Some details still remain out of reach. No complete megalodon skeleton has ever been found, so the exact shape of its fins, the precise contour of its head, and its true maximum size are still working estimates, refined as researchers apply stricter methods to the same handful of fossils. Future discoveries, or a fresh look at material already sitting in a museum drawer somewhere, could revise these numbers again, the same way this correction did. But the core picture has changed for good. Megalodon is not the great white shark, oversized and multiplied. It never was. Whatever swam beneath those Miocene seas, closing the distance on a whale in a single surge, wore a body built on its own terms, from a lineage that split away from every living shark long before Megalodon existed at all. The spine that finally proved it had been available the entire time, in a museum in Brussels, catalogued, labeled, and studied for more than a century, waiting for someone to stop assuming and start measuring.